So ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce to you our next very, very eminent speaker, Mr. Guhesh Ramanathan, CEO and co-founder of Exubator, who will guide you on everything from incubation to acceleration, exploring the startup journey with Exubator. Welcome on stage, sir.
All right. I think everybody's had a heavy lunch. I think Jinanda's also talking about it, saying everybody's had a heavy lunch. So most of you might be feeling a little sleepy. This is what I call the graveyard shift. So I'm going to try and entertain you with 3 stories. All right? That's what I'm going to try and do out here. How does it move? Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I was pressing the wrong buttons out here. Okay, so my name is Guhesh. I'm 3 things. One, I'm a teacher. So I teach entrepreneurship at a couple of the IIMs. I teach entrepreneurship at IIM Bangalore, and I teach entrepreneurship at IIM Shillong. I think in the last 5 years, I've taught maybe about 5,000 plus students and been able to successfully convert a number of them to becoming entrepreneurs themselves, which is, I think, is important as far as I'm concerned. 2, I'm also an innovation enabler in the sense that I work with very large, this is when I put on my consultant hat. I work with large companies. I work with people like Maersk, people like with Intel, with Target, Titan, Bosch, Shell, whole bunch of them that I've worked with, primarily to guide them on how they can build out their own innovation practices, primarily focusing upon startups. That's the second thing that I do. Third is I'm also an advisor. I work with a very large number of startups who reach out to me for specific advice on what is it that they need to do to be able to take things forward, right? And how is it that they can scale? And it's surprising the number of questions that sometimes come to me. Should I raise money from so-and-so person? Or, what should I do? How should I go about doing something? So those are some of the questions that typically keep coming to me. And the same thing that happens with, say, even for example, large enterprises that says, should we focus upon AI in this particular area or should we not? What should we do? So some of these things is what I'm going to talk about. The last thing is I'm also a scuba diver. I've been diving for almost about 24 years now. Thank you. And I've also written a book on what can a scuba diver actually teach enterprises and startups. It's a book called The Scuba Sutras, but more about that later if needed. Right? So my first story is more for investors, and it's about this company called Nestaway. I think everyone knows about Nestaway. Anyone who doesn't know Nestaway, can you just raise your hands? A couple of people who don't know Nestaway. All right. So I'll just give you the story about this company. These were founded by 2 people, Amar Sahu and Jitendra Jagdev. These are 2 people that I had met very long ago when they were running a different company called Briz TV, which they successfully sold to Airtel. And then after that, the story is that Amar's sister was, they had sold off this company, Briz TV, and they were trying to figure out what to do next, right? So sometime around 2013, 2014 sometime, Amar's sister was supposed to travel to Bangalore and she had just got a job. So she was supposed to come down to Bangalore and look for a place to stay in over there, right? The problem that was happening was the minute she used to go to any place, okay, and she said that, I'm single and, I'm looking for a place to stay. More often than not, landlords would turn around and say, I'm sorry, we're not going to give it to single people. Not just single women, single people, right? So that set Amar and Jitu onto a good idea. They said that let's figure out what is it that we can do for, bachelors who are traveling to Bangalore for whatever reasons, right? And they did something very interesting, which is that what they did was they put out, they said that, look, what if we were to make flats available only to bachelors, nobody else, right? So they said to test out the market, what they did was they took Amar's own house, they cleaned it up, obviously, because there was mess all around his house. They cleaned it up, took a photo of that, and they put up that post on Facebook that said that this flat is available to 4 bachelors at something like 8,000 rupees rent per person, and at 3 months deposit. Bangalore is typically 10 months deposit and whatever is the kind of thing, right? And on top of that, they were making a certain amount of margin. The interesting thing is this wasn't even his own flat. I mean, he had taken it on rent from somebody else. But that's what I call minimum viable product testing, right? So the minute he did that, he ended up getting, I think between the morning and the evening, they ended up getting something like 800 people who responded saying, we want this. There were people saying that, look, where can we come and pay the deposit? They didn't even want to take a look at the place. So the first check they raised was from IDG Ventures, was roughly about $1.5 million. They went on to raise a total of $110 million. And at the peak, they were valued at roughly about $220 million. That's almost 1,800 crores. You might have read about this company maybe about a couple of weeks ago that they were sold to Aurum for roughly a prop tech for about $11 million. Right? So the story that I want to relate over here specifically as far, and they had very, very good, backing. They had very interesting backing from people like, I think Tiger was one of the people who had backed this. IDG was another company that was backing it. Whole bunch of marquee investors who are backing this particular company. But a number of things went wrong. One of the key things that is happening over there, and that's what I put down over here, which is that founders really matter. The two main founders were joined by two more, and in between the founders fell apart. And in spite of that, investors still kept pumping money into this without doing too much of governance into what is happening. So two of the founders actually stepped aside. It was a very, very amicable, moving out. They set up their own company. They sold the shares back, but that should have sent the warning signals to the other investors. So governance really matters as far as investors is concerned. Finally, like I say, shit happens, right? Sometimes. The real reason why these guys went down was because of COVID. During COVID, the number of people who were staying in places like Bangalore and a number of other locations, they said, look, let's go back home. What's the point in staying over here? Because anyway, it's work from home. So they all moved out. The number of rental properties actually came down. And that's what really brought down the revenues as far as this is concerned. The same story applies to other organizations. I don't know if you can see them at the bottom, but for example, Taxi for Sure, you would have known when they were sold to Ola. And that was primarily because of, some harassment case or a molestation case that happened in Delhi when the government of India turned around and said that, look, all these taxis need to be regulated, right? So that is that. Byju's is going through trouble right now. We can see what's happening right now. And the last is another company called Broker Network, which I think you all heard about, Rahul Yadav's new company. In the hawk for what, 280 crores, which is what the guy's, done swaha on, right? So that's a piece that we're talking about, okay? The next story is, more for the corporates, right? And like I said, I work with enterprises on one side, I work with startups on the other side. You'd all have heard about, how Big Basket was acquired by the Tata Group for slightly more than $1 billion, and I think next year they're talking about an IPO of this company at $3.2 billion. They were sold for about $1 billion, and then after that they're talking about an IPO next year for about $3.2 billion is what they're talking about over here, right? I've known Vipul, Hari, I've known Sudhakar, all the founders of Big Basket. In fact, Hari was a classmate of mine from IIM Bangalore, so we've known him since then. The interesting part is this, which is that when they started this company off in Big Basket, they had come with some experience before. When they had initially set up a company called FabMart. Many of you may not even have heard of that name. But FabMart is a company that was initially invested into by Reliance way back in 1999. Okay? They had met up with Mr. Mukesh Ambani, and that is the time when, if you really look at it, the e-commerce web was sweeping the globe. Amazon was taking off, and Amazon was still selling books and music at that point in time. Google was just a few years old. So that is the time when FabMart was actually starting off in India, and these are the people who really pioneered it in India. So the story is that Mr. Ambani said, okay, we like your story. Here's 5 crores. Go ahead and start this particular company. And these guys said, look, we don't even have the company name registered at this point in time. They said, acha, aapka naam kya hai? Sudhakar, what's your bank account number? Usme transfer kar rahe. Okay, so it was literally along those lines the way these things happen. But then, long story short, FabMart, because of various issues, like say for example, at that point in time, it was primarily to do with internet speeds. Transaction volumes were very, very low. So finally, they wound it up and they sold it to Trinetra. But that is the background that they came with to build out this new company called Big Basket. Okay, they came with phenomenal experience. And what is the lesson in this for people like, say for example, the corporates, right? Like I said, I worked with enterprises like Maersk, I worked with enterprises like Titan, a whole bunch of them. But the real story as far as enterprises are concerned is that when you're looking to work with startups, the strategic fit matters the most. I've seen enough accelerators, incubators, literally any company that you can think of today. They have these things which are called, an incubator. I'm part of, a startup accelerators group, which is a corporate startup accelerators group that has 400 members on WhatsApp. Okay, I don't know how many such WhatsApp groups are there all around the place, right? So the thing is this, which is that, and in many of those cases, we come across, almost like, the chaska of the season. I mean, the flavor of the season is AI. So it doesn't matter what we are doing, but we need to do something in the AI space. 3 years back, it was crypto. Something is happening in crypto, so we'll do something in crypto. What does someone like Oracle have to do with crypto? Okay, or what does someone like say, well, NVIDIA had something to do with crypto because there they were dependent upon selling their GPUs, right? So those kind of things really come into the picture. But the point is this, which is that whenever an enterprise wants to work with a startup, the strategic fit really matters. Scale matters. Big Basket was huge when they were acquired by the Tata Group. And the Tata Group continued to engage with Big Basket all through the journey. They were pumping some of their products through them just to keep an eye in terms of what is happening, right? And finally, the joint vision as far as both the acquired company as well as the founding, as well as the acquirer really matters over here, right? And there are other examples that we can think of. The shared vision in terms of Tata is to build out a huge retail network and online retail network. So the other acquisition that they have is Tata 1mg, right? If you look at, say, Reliance are building everything on top of their digital infrastructure. So they're saying, okay, we'll look at companies like Savan, which is essentially a music distribution platform, right? So all of those things matter over here. The third one is something which is more meant for startups. And I see that there are plenty of startups over here, right? OpenAI, I'm not going to ask how many people don't know of this, ChatGPT. So if there is anyone who raises their hands, the corona kind of thing is what I'm talking about, right? But recently Sam Altman was here. But the story that I really want to bring about over here is they've raised close to $11.3 billion. And $3 billion has come from Microsoft itself, with the promise of more money coming in. It's a different story how they raise the money from Microsoft, what are the terms for that particular money that they have raised. We'll talk about that. That's too long to talk about at this point in time, right? But the critical thing is this, which is that the balance money they have primarily raised from other potential partners and not just from investors. If you really think about it, right? I mean, and many of you who were involved in the ChatGPT journey all along, you would have heard phrases like this, right? That ChatGPT is going to be a Google killer. Right? How many of you have heard that phrase, that ChatGPT is going to be a Google? More or less everyone's heard of that phrase, right? Now Bing, Microsoft Bing is another one, right? So, and the point was, in accepting money from Microsoft, wouldn't these guys have been worried that says that, look, these guys acquire it, they might drive it the way they want, and whatever might happen as far as this particular tech is concerned might just go down the tube. So the point that I wanted to make over here is, what happened? I didn't do anything. Ah, okay. I think the minute I mentioned ChatGPT, something happened. Okay. So anyway, so like I said, partnerships really matter, right? And I've come across companies, startups, which primarily start by saying, look, whatever I'm making right now, the stuff that I'm building right now is so secretive that I do not want to speak to large companies. Between you and me, large companies don't care. You're so small, you're so minuscule at this point in time that they're only looking after you to figure out, saying that, look, how is it that we can make this big? I've seen a company called OpenApp, okay, which is building, and there are examples over there. There's a company called Remote Lock, okay, which does another company called OpenApp, okay, which actually builds these small locking systems, okay, the remote locking systems. Guess who we got them to partner with? They partnered with Yale, the biggest lock manufacturer in the world. They could have just done one gulp and finished off this particular company, but Remote lock is now being one of the bigger drive areas as far as ASA Abloy, which is the parent company of Yale, is concerned. Or you take Husk Power Systems. Husk Power Systems is partnering with Shell. And Husk Power is a company that basically uses rice husk to generate electricity and distribute it in multiple different ways. So I think I have only a couple of minutes. We ourselves, as Exubator, right? We work with very large, and you know, Husk Power, for example, when they're working with someone like Shell, they should be worried because Shell should, technically speaking, turn around and say, look, you know, we are in the oil and gas business. You are in a business that could potentially take revenue away from us at some point in time or the other. So why would Husk even think about partnering over there? So the point that I wanted to make over here is that don't worry about large partnerships. Those things can happen. Last one is we ourselves. We work with, you know, really large consulting companies. We work with people like BCG. And BCG comes over and tells us saying that, look, you know, this is our client, one of the largest, you know, FMCG companies in the world. They want to try and see how is it that they can work with startup innovation. Technically speaking, we should be scared. Saying that, look, BCG can take our business away and go to those other people and charge, you know, maybe 800 times what we typically charge, right? Those kind of things. But that's the thing that I'm talking about over there. So here I've covered 3 different stories. One for investors, stories for enterprises, what they should look at, and stories for startups. With that, I'm going to stop. I'm reachable at these 2. But if you have any questions, I think we have a minute. I'm more than happy to answer them for you. No questions? Yeah. Yes, sir.
My question was about Nestaway. From what I heard, sorry. Thanks. From what I heard is that Nestaway, the unit economics also was a bit of a problem, but I have not confirmed this yet. Do you know anything about this?
Yeah, I do. Okay, I was deeply involved in them all through the journey, so that's something which I know. They didn't have a problem with unit economics. The problem was scale. See the level of pressure that is coming from the investors for them to scale, which is what I think Zozzle, the folks from Zozzle who were talking about, which is saying that, you know, all e-commerce companies were primarily being driven by investors to achieve that scale, even at lower, you know, unit economics. What these guys were typically doing was, for example, they would take on a house on rent for say 20,000 rupees. They would rent it out for 24,000 rupees. Which means per house, they were making 4,000 rupees. That's not the problem. But to be able to take on a large number of houses, they needed a large front field team. And that costs money, right? To be able to sell it, or to be able to sell that services to a large, they need to spend a lot of money on marketing, right? So the problem was this, which is that their overhead costs were going way beyond, you know, what the company could have scaled up to. And at that point in time, there were other organizations also that were coming in. People like Oyo got into the act with, they acquired this company called Zostel. Oyo acquired this company called Zostel. And so the unit economics was not a problem. It was the pressure to scale and the pressure on the founders to, you know, kind of chase a dream that was being driven by the investors to quite an extent, which is what led to the problem.
Thank you so much, sir. That was indeed a very, very insightful session.